Very happy to present my paper here in Seoul. So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, Professor Young-Joo Kim, for making all this possible. So let me switch to my presentation. The title of my talk is Kant on Trolleys and Autonomous Driving. In this talk, I shall take a Kantian perspective on a specific problem of autonomous driving, which can be paralleled to the famous trolley problem. My main question is this. Against the background of Kantian ethics, how should autonomous vehicles be programmed when it comes to trolley-like situations? My talk will have 5 parts. To begin with, I shall spell out the basic features of the trolley problem. I will then discuss the question of whether the programmer of autonomous vehicles is to be paralleled with the trolley driver or rather with the so-called bystander. Afterwards, I will present a solution to the trolley problem that I think Kant himself would have given. I shall then rebut 3 objections and sum up. I start with part 1, the trolley problem. The trolley problem, which most of you will be familiar with, has been coined by Philippa Foot and others. The basic situation is as follows. There are 5 people on the track straight ahead. The trolley cannot stop in time, the people cannot escape, anyone hit by the trolley will die. The trolley driver's only option is to divert the trolley by turning a switch. However, there is 1 person on the other track. So if the driver does not turn the trolley, 5 will die. If he turns it, 1 will die. Given this situation, 2 different questions arise. First, should the driver redirect the trolley? I call this, easy enough, the first trolley question or problem. This question takes a backseat in the current debate in that most discussants simply assume without further ado that the trolley may be diverted. And it is only against the background of this assumption that a second question is formulated. Why may the trolley be diverted in the described case, although in other similar situated cases, analogous decisions may not be made? The issue here is the following. Although the trolley may be diverted in the described scenario, so the prevailing thesis, a surgeon may not remove a healthy person's organs, leading to this person's death in order to save 5 other terminally ill persons. Likewise, an obese person may not be thrown down a bridge above the tracks in order to block the trolley with his or her body mass and thus save the 5. But if that is true, that is, if the organs are not allowed to be removed, and if it is not allowed to push someone off the bridge to stop the trolley, then why may the trolley be diverted in the original trolley situation? In all cases, 1 person is sacrificed in a certain way to save 5. And yet only in 1 case, that is, in the original trolley case, does the action seem to most morally permissible. The second trolley question then is basically this. What is the difference between, say, the case of organ donation and the described trolley case? Foot's response to both problems goes like this. Regarding the trolley case, there are only negative duties involved. No matter what a trolley driver does, he will violate a negative duty. That is, violate a duty to refrain from doing something. It is not allowed to kill anyone. Unfortunately, however, the trolley driver cannot help but kill 1 person or 5 persons. He will kill either way. Since only negative duties are given, the number of victims has to be minimized, Foot says. So the trolley should be redirected to save the 5. The case concerning organ donation, however, is different according to Foot, because there a positive as well as a negative duty are involved. The surgeon has the choice of killing 1 healthy person and thus helping 5 sick people, or letting 5 terminally ill people die. He's thus confronted with a positive duty to help 5 persons and a negative duty to refrain from killing 1 person. Since, according to Foot, negative duties trump positive duties, negative duties are more important or stronger. To kill is worse than not to help others. Consequently, the organ donation may not be consummated. A healthy person may not be killed to save 5 because the 5 who would otherwise die from organ failure would simply be left to die, while the healthy person would be actively killed. In the case of the trolley, again, this is different, says Foot, because here the driver only has the choice between killing 1 or 5 people. As we shall see, this reasoning has significant flaws. Nevertheless, Foot has generated an enormous discussion about a very large number of somehow similar cases involving bridges, loops, bystanders, bombs, trapdoors, tunnels, and more. But the discussion of these various cases is aimed solely at answering the second trolley question: why one person may sometimes be sacrificed for 5 others and sometimes not. In contrast to what usually takes place in trolley discussions, however, I will not deal primarily with this second trolley question. That is, I will not analyze all these modified cases, but rather deal with the much more basic first question: should the trolley in the originally described case be diverted or not? More to the point, my question is, would Kant divert the trolley or not? And the answer to this question will shed light on the question of how autonomous vehicles should be programmed concerning trolley-like situations against the backdrop of Kantian ethics. So, part 2, driver, bystander, and programmer. Before I address this question, another distinction deserves attention: the distinction between the driver of the trolley and a bystander standing next to the tracks. While the driver can turn or not turn the trolley while riding it, a bystander who passes the trolley's tracks by accident is able to turn a switch outside the trolley to change the trolley's way. Some people take this distinction between driver and bystander to be morally important for the following reason: both would kill the one by turning the trolley. But whereas the driver does not kill the 5 by not intervening, for he did not start the trolley, the driver of the trolley would indeed kill the 5 since he started the trolley and steered it up to this point. Therefore, clarification is called for whether the programmer is to be paralleled with the driver or the bystander. I will keep things short at this point. In my view, the distinction of driver and bystander is morally irrelevant, at least in the case described. Neither the bystander nor the driver kills the 5 by doing nothing. Although the driver started the trolley and steered it up to the point in question, he does not kill the 5 in any morally significant way. That is, he does not neglect a negative duty by doing nothing. It is not his fault, after all, that the trolley cannot be stopped. He did not do anything wrong. Rather, the whole event is an accident. So by doing nothing, the driver does not kill the 5, he only lets them die. The fact that he started the trolley is irrelevant. The same holds, of course, for the bystander who did not start the trolley. Both let 5 die by not intervening, both kill the one by turning the switch. Behold, however, that this does not yet answer the question of what the driver or the bystander are morally required to do. So let us get to the main part, that is to part 3, and to Kant's answer to the trolley problem. According to Kant, is it permissible to turn the trolley or not? Again, it is irrelevant in moral respect whether we start from the case of the bystander or driver. For simplicity, I will speak of the driver. The easiest and best way to figure out what Kant's decision would be in a trolley-like situation, I think, is to look at Kant's system of duties. 2 of Kant's theses are particularly important here. First, every duty is either a narrow or a wide duty. Narrow duties are those that are negative, that is, duties of omission. They dictate directly to an agent what he or she must not do. There is no latitude. One famous example is the prohibition of lying. One must not lie. However, the situation presents itself. Wide duties, on the other hand, are positive duties or commission duties, which have latitude insofar as they enjoin maxims and not concrete actions. One should be charitable, for example, but in doing so, it is not specified a priori when and where exactly one should behave charitably toward whom and how. Second, there are, according to Kant, no collision of duties. Duties cannot conflict. This is, in short, because duties are categorical, absolutely valid commandments that command objectively and necessarily. What is commanded must and can always be done, because ought implies can, and therefore duties cannot collide. Against the background of these two theses of Kant's, there are in principle three different options to reconstruct a trolley situation in Kantian terms. Namely as a combination of two narrow duties, two wide duties, or of one narrow and one wide duty. Let us have a closer look at option 1. The driver of the trolley could be interpreted as being faced with two narrow duties. That is, as being faced with the choice of fulfilling either one narrow duty, not to kill the 1, or another narrow duty, not to kill the 5. But since in this case there would be a collision of duties which is impossible, this interpretation is ruled out. Option 2 is to assume that the driver is faced with two wide duties. That is, faced with the choice between fulfilling one wide duty of helping the 5 or fulfilling another wide duty of helping the 1. Since wide duties have latitude, the driver can, so to speak, choose whom to save, just as I can choose whether to give money to this homeless person or that one. Both actions would be morally permitted, but neither would be required as such. Accordingly, there would be no conflict of duties. And yet, this is not an adequate reconstruction of the situation either. For according to this reading, one would have to say that the driver is permitted to divert the trolley in order to fulfill the wide duty of saving the 5, and he is equally permitted not to divert the trolley in order to fulfill the wide duty of saving the 1. This last formulation, however, the driver is permitted not to turn the trolley in order to fulfill the wide duty to save the 1, is not an adequate description of the situation. For the single person on the tracks is, at least in a certain sense, not in danger at all before the trolley driver considers what to do. It is not the case that this person's process of dying has already begun, as in the case of organ donation, which is supposed to save the lives of the terminally ill. If the 1 is in danger at all, it is only because the driver of the trolley is considering diverting the trolley. Without this consideration, he would not be in danger at all. So the driver of the trolley is not helping the 1 by not redirecting the trolley. To illustrate, if someone considers redirecting the natural course of a tidal wave from a large city to a small village, but then decides not to, one would also not say he saved the inhabitants of the small village. This leads us to option 3. According to this option, the driver is faced with the choice of either fulfilling the wide duty to help the 5 or the narrow duty not to kill the 1. Since the duty to help others is precisely a wide duty with latitude, the driver is not obligated to fulfill this duty at this precise moment. The narrow duty not to kill, on the other hand, has no latitude. Consequently, the driver may not kill under any circumstances, not in general and not in this situation. Accordingly, from a Kantian perspective, it is morally imperative not to divert the trolley. Because of the width of one duty, there is no collision of duties. The narrow duty trumps the wide one. Thus, it is not permissible to divert the trolley to save the 5. I call this the wide-narrow interpretation, and I think it's how Kant would view the situation at stake. Let me now rebut 3 objections against the presented wide-narrow interpretation. The first objection goes as follows. It is not a wide duty to save the 5 persons because there is no latitude at all. Wide duties, however, have latitude. The driver has no latitude to save the 5 today or tomorrow, a little or a lot. He can solely perform one single action to save the 5 from death. Without latitude, there is no wide duty, so the wide narrow interpretation cannot be true. However, this objection neglects the difference between the general wide duty to help others and the supposed specific duty to save the 5 on the track. The driver has a general wide duty to help others, and this general duty has latitude. Therefore, no specific action is required here precisely. The fact that there is latitude means that only a maxim, a principle of will, is commanded, but no specific action. Therefore, it is morally permissible not to save the 5. The point here is not that there is no wide duty. There is, because the wide duty to help others in need is always present. But this duty does not command the rescue of the 5 in the specific situation. In the case of a drowning child, for instance, the situation may be different. While it is also a wide duty to rescue a drowning child, this wide duty can be narrowed down, so to speak, provided that there is nothing that speaks against the rescue of the child. Nevertheless, the wide duty remains wide in principle. However, the situation in the trolley case is not analogous to that of the drowning child, for there is a reason not to save the 5, that is, the lonely person on the other track, while ex hypothesi there is no reason not to save the drowning child. If you had to kill a second child in order to save the first child, if you would have to hold on to a second child to save the first, for example, which would push it underwater and drown it, you would not be allowed to do this either. So although in practice there is no latitude for the trolley driver, it is still a wide duty to save the 5. The wide narrow interpretation remains correct. The second objection to my wide narrow interpretation runs as follows. It is not a wide duty, but a narrow duty to save the 5 persons on the track, for the driver kills the 5 persons after all if he does not divert the trolley, which is a violation of a narrow duty. Therefore, the wide narrow interpretation cannot be correct. This objection is not convincing either. As I have already argued, there is no morally relevant act of killing involved if the driver does not divert the trolley. The fact that the driver set the trolley in motion is irrelevant. To illustrate, imagine that you are driving your car in a perfectly orderly manner. Suddenly a little boy on a bicycle comes shooting out of the bushes and you have absolutely no chance to avoid him. There's a collision, the boy dies. Did you kill him? Since you were neither speeding nor using drugs or anything else, and since you were rather driving carefully, you probably wouldn't say that you killed the boy, at least not in a morally relevant sense. Of course, the boy is dead, and of course there is a causal connection between you and the boy's death. But you did not kill the boy intentionally or deliberately, nor did you act negligently. No morally relevant killing took place. Likewise, the driver of the trolley does not kill the 5 on the tracks in a morally relevant sense if he does not divert the trolley. It is not his fault that the people are there on the tracks, and it is not his fault that the brakes do not work better. Now, you might object that there might be a difference between the car driver and the trolley driver. For contrary to the driver of the trolley, the driver of the car has no alternative. He cannot do anything. The trolley driver, on the other hand, can take evasive action. But it is important to see that the trolley driver really has no morally acceptable alternative either. The only thing he can do is something that violates a narrow duty. But within Kantian ethics, violating a narrow duty is never an acceptable option. So the situation rather is that the trolley driver has no morally acceptable alternative either. And it is important that the driver's motive in not diverting the trolley is not to see the 5 die. Rather, his maxim is, I refrain from diverting the trolley so that I do not kill the one, since this is strictly prohibited. The purpose of the action is not to kill, and thus this maxim is universalizable. Just on passing, it is clear that acts of omissions are acts according to Kant. So, the driver is not permitted to divert the trolley. Thus, contrary to what Foot assumes, the driver of the trolley does not have the choice between killing one person and killing the 5. He does not kill the 5 in a morally irrelevant sense if he does not redirect the trolley. Consequently, it is a wide duty not to kill the 5, and thus the wide narrow interpretation remains. The third and last objection goes like this. It is not a narrow duty not to divert the trolley, because diverting it would not imply killing the one at all. Rather, his or her death is only an undesirable side effect. What the driver wants when he diverts the trolley is to save the 5, not to kill the one. The death of the one is not a means to an end. It is also not intended and thus only an undesired side effect of the good deed of saving. So the objection goes. This objection is based on the principle of double effect. This principle states that an act that leads to an undesirable side effect may be permissible if various conditions are met. The side effect must not be directly intended, it must not be a means, the act itself must be morally neutral, and the undesirable side effect must be proportionate to the good effect. Applied to the trolley situation, this means that diverting the trolley is not an act of killing, because the death of the one is not intended. It is not a means to save the 5, the action itself of turning the switch is morally neutral, and numbers are proportionate. Consequently, no narrow duty is violated. So, the objection goes, the wide narrow interpretation must be wrong. However, this objection is not convincing either. Even if we disregard the massive systematic problems the principle of double effect comes along with, the reference to this principle cannot help. For the principle of double effect plays no role for Kant and runs counter to the basic idea of his ethics. There is no direct reference to the principle of double effect in Kant's published writings. If it played any significant role in Kant's ethics, one would expect it to appear at least in his major works. However, it does not. Although self-defense is a classic Aquinian example of the implementation of the principle of double effect, Kant does not refer to it when discussing this topic. According to Kant, self-defense that results in the death of the aggressor is morally permissible only if or because the aggressor is an unjust aggressor, but it is not permissible, though perhaps excusable, to kill an innocent person in order to save one's life. This is also evident when Kant discusses the so-called plank of Carneades. Here the situation goes as follows. 2 persons find themselves in the cold water on the high seas after a shipwreck. Both are clinging to a small floating plank. Unfortunately, the small plank can carry only one of them. So the following question arises. Is it allowed to push the other off the plank to ensure one's own survival? According to Kant, one may not push the other person off the plank because the other is innocent. Innocent persons may never be killed, come what may. The principle of double effect is irrelevant for Kant. Even more, it is completely contrary to the spirit of his whole ethics. For the condition that the undesirable side effect and the good effect of the action must be in proportion can never be fulfilled within the framework of Kantian ethics. According to Kant, one cannot weigh the value of persons. Offsetting the value of human lives is not possible. The reason for this is the dignity of the human being, that is the fact that every single human being has absolute unconditional value. Thus, one may not sacrifice one person for another, nor may one sacrifice one person for 5 or 500. other persons. So, if the trolley is diverted, a narrow duty is neglected. Narrow duties may never be neglected. Therefore, the trolley may not be diverted. The principle of double effect is irrelevant at this point. So, let me conclude. According to Kant, the answer to the first trolley question is this. The trolley may not be diverted to save the 5. In fact, it does not matter how many lives are at stake. This is because the driver faces a wide duty and a narrow duty. Because of the latitude of the wide duty and the negative nature of the narrow duty, the driver is not commanded to perform the wide duty, that is, to help the 5. He is not allowed to divert the trolley. This also makes clear Kant's position concerning the second trolley question. That is, concerning the question of why flipping the switch is permissible in the trolley case, but not in organ donation cases. For this problem does not arise against the background of the Kantian answer to the first question. If one is not allowed to redirect a trolley, no matter what, one does not need to show why one is not allowed to make analogous decisions in other cases. I then refuted 3 objections to my wide-narrow interpretation. This yielded 3 main results. First, it is indeed a wide duty to save the 5 even if there is no latitude with respect to saving them. The general wide duty to help others holds nonetheless. Second, not to turn the trolley does not constitute a morally relevant act of killing the 5. The driver bears no responsibility for the death of the 5. Third, the death of the one cannot be excused as an undesirable side effect. The principle of double effect does not apply within Kantian ethics. Note that Kant would, by the way, not agree with the thesis that 5 human lives are worth more than 1 anyway. The absolute value of human life cannot be aggregated. In this sense, the minimization of harm is not possible in the described trolley case. The value of human life cannot be offset. 5 people are of no greater worth than 1 person. The understanding of dignity as an absolute value that has no price prohibits such offsetting. So, how should autonomous vehicles be programmed with regard to trolley-like situations against the background of Kantian ethics? Now that we have an analysis of the trolley situation at hand, we can easily see that what applies to drivers and bystanders in the trolley case analogously applies to the programming of autonomous vehicles. Hence, it is not permissible for the Kantian programmer of an autonomous vehicle to make his algorithm steer the car around a group of people if doing so results in hitting a smaller group or a single person. I do not claim that indeed it is morally obligatory not to flip the switch. My only aim was to show what a Kantian position looks like. One final note. In recent literature, doubts came up about the reasonableness of comparing hypothetical trolley situations with situations that autonomous vehicles might get into. It has been argued, for instance, that in real life we cannot be sure whether endangered persons really do have no change of survival at all, and that trolley problems get much more complicated when more details are known, as the age of the persons involved, their gender, their health conditions, their role in society, their criminal record, social status, and so on. However, I think that those objections can be met too. It is crucial to see that from a Kantian point of view, those real-life aspects mentioned above, as age and social status, are completely irrelevant in this case. Human beings possess dignity no matter how old or healthy they are. Furthermore, although it is certainly true that real-life situations we enter into in driving or rather programming autonomous cars are more complicated. Thinking about trolley cases makes us see essential aspects of the ethical problem to be solved, and this asset is not undermined by the fact that in reality more features of the situation have to be taken into account. The fact that in reality we surely have to consider risks and probabilities does not change that either. Solving the trolley problem in a merely theoretical manner is indeed a sensible thing to do, since exploring the theoretical framework of a practical problem does help to solve the practical problem. This is true even if trolley situations in real life are somewhat more rocky. So thank you very much for your attention.